Good afternoon, and welcome to Achates Live on Thursday, the 9th of September, our first event in our new slot of the second Thursday of the month. I'm Caroline McCormick, and I'm the director of Achates, the strategy, fundraising, and now recruitment company, which I founded in 2014. And I'm really delighted that today we'll be taking the final of these areas as a focus of our event today on ethical recruitment. Good afternoon, and welcome to Achates Live on Thursday. Always mute your YouTube. Otherwise, you get a little reverb of yourself playing back as I just did there. So it's a subject that I know is on many people's minds at present as we seek to rebuild in the period ahead. Achates was the loyal advisor and friend to Aeneas, who told the truth. And that idea has always underpinned our approach here at Achates. And one of the great joys for us is that so many of you that we work with see us as an extension of your teams as a result. So leading our session today will be Matthew Swan, our Director of Recruitment. It's not Matthew's first Achates Live. He's joined us in the past as his role as Chief Executive of City of London Symphonia, but we're really delighted he'll be hosting our event today. Thanks for hosting us today, Matthew.
Thank you, Caroline. Good to be here.
So Matthew's joined Achates as Director of Recruitment, and that really came from a series of conversations that I found really inspiring with Matthew about the need for change in the sector, and that recruitment is only part of the solution to that change, and that organisations themselves will need to evolve and change as well. And I'm sure that's a subject we'll be looking at today. In line with our other offers, the need for a disruptor model in pricing and approach is really central to what we want to improve, whilst ensuring that what we do is grounded in quality. And next, welcome to those of you joining us live. It's great to have you with us. Please note that this session will also be available on YouTube, as I've just proved, after the event. I should just say that all information is correct at the point of broadcast, but may change in the future. So, if I may, I'd love to be able to introduce you to our brilliant panelists today who'll be sharing their insights and experiences with you. First of all, Elise Brown, artist manager and founder of the Diversity in Classical Music Network. Elise, real pleasure to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Caroline.
And next, Lisa Corhey, who is the Executive Director and CEO of Cardboard Citizens. Hello, Lisa.
That's joint CEO, but glad to be here. Thanks, Caroline.
Was I just trying to give you a secret new job role? Sorry, Lisa. And absolutely next, Carolyn Forsyth, who's Executive Director and Joint CEO of Talua. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Lovely to have you all with us. Thanks so much. So if I may, I'm just going to give a little more detailed introduction to each of our panelists. Firstly, Elise Brown. Elise has been in the classical music industry for 15 years. She's worked across the industry from artists and orchestral management to promoters and venues, including IMG Artists and Raymond Goubet. As well as running the Diversity in Classical Music Network, Elise is currently a consultant at Icon Arts Edition Peters, a forward-thinking music management partnership supporting composers and organisations with contemporary classical and multi-genre projects, with a focus on diversifying the industry. Elise is also board director at Leeds Conservatoire, a trustee of United in Hammersmith and Fulham, and on the development committee of Clean Break. We've got three really impressive panelists today. Thanks for joining us, Elise. Next, Lisa. Lisa is an arts sector leader with a track record of driving strategic organisational growth alongside financial resilience, structural reviews, and enabling people to succeed. And I know that's something all her team will echo. Lisa has worked with Cardboard Citizens for over 15 years, initially as development director and then as executive director and joint CEO since 2019. Before that, she was responsible for initiating and delivering high-profile arts and cultural events with major donors and celebrity patrons for Cancer Research UK. Lisa studied fine art and has an MA in Enterprise and Management for the Creative Arts. She's completed a Claw Leadership course and a year-long Innovation in Leadership course with the V&A. Great to have you with us, Lisa. And finally, Carolyn. Carolyn has an impressive 17-year track record of success, demonstrating her dynamism as a detailed focused producer and arts manager, which she gained in senior roles within theatre, young people's work, outdoor site-specific shows, international touring and festivals. Carolyn's producing highlights include Lift's 2018 site-specific piece, Fly By Night by Duke Riley, Minefield by Lola Arias, and Something Very Far Away by Mark Arenz and Matthew Robbins, which won an Off-West End Award and toured to Singapore and Melbourne festivals. In 2005, Carolyn was part of the leadership team responsible for launching the first purpose-built children's theatre, that's the Unicorn Theatre, of course, in the UK. Our guests will be sharing their insights with you, and there will be time for questions, so please do get those ready. But first of all, Matthew's going to set the frame for our session. So thank you. Over to you, Matthew.
Thanks, Caroline. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Achates Live. The last 18 months has shone a light on the pressing need for greater diversity across the arts, and particularly within the arts workforce. Although Arts Council England's Equality, Diversity and the Creative Case report for 1920 reported a slight increase in ethnicity, disability, LGBTQI and gender diversity in senior posts from previous years, there's still a long way to go, not least when considering that while, for example, people from Black, Asian and ethnically diverse backgrounds made up 17% of the national portfolio organisation workforce in that year, only 11% of chief executives and chairs were from those same backgrounds. There are also growing conversations to be had around socioeconomic background. How do we ensure that there's a level playing field within the arts for people who come from backgrounds where education and employment opportunities were limited because of geographical location or family background? And how do we address growing awareness around neurodiversity or gender identity or other lived experiences across society, for example, people who've experienced homelessness? And perhaps most importantly, how do we address all of these issues in terms of their intersectionality? The COVID pandemic has both further heightened these issues and, as I say, shone a light on them. There's certainly a growing awareness across the arts sector that they need to be addressed, but also concern and worry. How does my organisation go about doing this? Will we appear inauthentic or tokenistic? Will we get the language of diversity wrong? Will we come up against resistance from our board or our funders? All fears that many of us will recognise, and fears that can easily be overcome with the right approach. And the traditional recruitment practices that many of us have experienced are no longer fit for purpose, particularly at senior level. The tap on the shoulder, who you know approach that executive search firms have employed for many years don't match the need for open, inclusive, diversity-forward approaches, as highlighted by the disparity in the number of people from diverse backgrounds in our workforce compared to those in senior roles. And many in arts and culture have persisted in looking for unicorn candidates, someone who meets every single facet of a senior role from a very tickless perspective and likely does not exist, rather than recognizing the varied career paths and trajectories that exist in our sector and giving people the support they need to thrive in senior roles. What approach do we need instead? What defines an inclusive, ethical approach, particularly around senior posts, including the leading development roles that many people attending today currently occupy or aspire to? What needs to change in order to create a truly diverse and inclusive sector at a senior level across fundraising, producing, and at CEO and artistic director level? I'm delighted to say that the three panelists we have today can provide recent live and lived perspective on this issue. Lisa at Cardboard Citizens have recently appointed a new director of development. And how did an ethical approach in that process lead to a higher quality, quantity, and diversity of applicants? Tallower are about to embark on recruitment of a new head of development for the UK's outstanding Black British theatre company. How are they taking an ethical approach to finding a senior development professional with lived experience of their mission to champion Black excellence in theatre and reflect Black experiences through art? And Elise Brown and the Diversity in Classical Music Network. The classical music is a sector that's slowly awakening to the need for greater diversity on stage. What is that network's approach to supporting that same change in the roles behind the scenes? How are they advancing the cause of the artists, managers, producers and fundraisers from diverse backgrounds who are similarly, if not more, underrepresented than artists in that industry? As Caroline says, do make sure that as the panelists are speaking, you have your questions ready. It'd be great to open this up to a wider discussion. But for now, I am going to pass straight on to, I'm just making sure I'm getting this exactly in the right order, to Lisa at Cardboard Citizens. Lisa, over to you.
Hi there, thanks Matthew. I think I'm here today because we've been on a bit of a journey with all this stuff over the last 2 years. And really, I think I can say that we started that journey feeling really skeptical about whether or not we could actually make things any different. We were also really worried about taking on extra work, knowing that it would be that, and everyone is so stretched and has been and continues to be as we move forward. And just generally, I think we were a bit unsure about being able to make a difference. But we have made some progress, which has been, you know, created like a massive motivation for our organisation. It's really transforming who we are. I think at Cardboard Citizens, we've got a really strong belief that striving to attract and to keep a diverse range of employees, artists, members will make us the best we can possibly be. Make Cardboard Citizens a good place to come to stay and to be part of. And diversity for us has been, it's really broad, really. It's been focused on diversity of background, socioeconomic diversity, age, gender, race, disability, sexuality. And one of the main things that we've done when we looked at our recruitment processes is we selected a few of those key protected characteristics, plus lived experience of homelessness, saying, if you've got one of those and you meet the minimum criteria for a job, then we will give you an interview. And I mentioned that one because, well, the employment lawyers didn't like it to begin with, but, you know, we've really pushed for doing that because it's a bit more risky to do. But I think it's one of the main things that we've done that has totally transformed the number of people that are applying for jobs at Cardboard Citizens. I mean, we've seen the number of applicants quadruple, and we are now collecting diversity stats, and we're seeing huge percentages of people come through with those protected characteristics that we identified, and also lived experience of homelessness. Other things that we did along the way in the early stages was just review job descriptions and person specs to ensure that language is gender neutral, and that those person specs have an emphasis on core skills where possible. Make it simple, really, getting rid of scary lists of things, you know, where you read it and you think, you know, it has to be some kind of superhuman person needs to apply for this job. We're trying to break all that down and get rid of that, and at the same time offering interviews to people who could meet that minimum criteria. So it's quite a hard balance to strike. We're increasing word of mouth advertising. We've also had the opportunity to do lots of to enhance our processes and to do lots more headhunting by working with Achates, for example, our recent Director of Development appointment. We implemented a new applicant tracking software, an online system, meaning that it's much more accessible, easy to do on your phone, wherever. We're still running the offline process at the same time. Importantly, we're allowing candidates to send in videos now instead of filling in forms. I think that makes a big difference in terms of accessibility of people feeling that they can express themselves in the way that they want to, and that's been really powerful. We've reviewed the interview process as a two-way thing, and we're ensuring that we have diverse interview panels. And then as we get into the recruitment process, we're also involving the wider team more and our membership in the interview and selection process to make both parties feel more engaged and to really give candidates a better sense of who we really are. So all of that has led to 8 appointments in the last 2 years. 75% of those appointments have been people from global majority or with lived experience of homelessness. And that just feels like such a difference, and really exciting in terms of thinking about our future. Not least, the most recent one of those appointments is our new AD and Joint Chief Executive, who has lived experience himself. So we're transforming ourselves. And I think in terms of thinking about keeping people, we've been on a 7th-month equality, diversity and inclusion program with a company called Fearless Futures. And I think, you know, when people sort of look for like, oh, can we do like a half-day training course on this subject matter, that feels laughable, really, because I think what's required is the time and the space together. For us, certainly, we've benefited from getting comfortable with talking about things that we wouldn't have talked about before. And I think that helps make people feel more involved, more included in our organisation. We're working on difficult things like calling out, calling in, having those awkward conversations, all to get people working together better on a more level playing field. Our whole staff team attend that training together with the board and with our members. Now, that's been quite interesting because it's totally shaken up the power dynamic between those groups of people. And I think that's been something that's quite special that we want to continue in our day-to-day operations. We've created a safe space for people of colour in the organisation. We've got an EDI working group, diversity person on the board. None of that is to say that those people are responsible for, you know, driving and taking everything forward, but it's more like the more we do, the more we realise there is to do. And we're now able to embed thinking about diversity and inclusion naturally into everything we do and think about as individuals and as an organisation. We're trying. It's a long road. It feels scary at first, but I think how we behave, how we communicate, how we welcome people in, and to look at how we improve all of those things is the only way forward. And we're seeing all the benefits pay off of all the work we put in, so it's worth it.
Thank you, Lisa. There's some very thought-provoking things there, particularly the honesty around the concern around the extra work that sometimes a diverse approach takes, but also the flip side of that being the enormous benefits that it brings. And we'll perhaps explore some of that later in the session. I'm going to pass over now to Carolyn from Tallowa, who are about to embark on a new piece of recruitment. Carolyn, thank you very much.
Thank you. So I want to talk about my personal ethos around ethical recruitment and how it's developed over the course of my career. The majority of my career has involved managing teams, and because of that, I've had the benefit of being able to develop that practice that I would want to share with all of you today. So I started working with Tallowa 10 months ago. We are in our 35th year. We are a Black British touring theatre company, and we are based in Croydon, and our current season is ongoing. So my practice is based on an inclusive approach, and what I would want to kind of flag with everyone is to think about demographics. I'm a massive fan of stats, and you've probably already heard from Lisa. Lisa was quoting stats. I think that's actually really important to look at facts. I think that, so let's talk about facts. Ethnically diverse people make up 14% of the population in the UK. In some parts of the UK, that demographic can hit to 40 or 50%. And I use demographic tools whatever company I'm working for in the area that I'm based in, to think about what should the makeup of my company look like, looking at the area that I'm based in. And I think that's quite a useful way of creating targets when you're looking at inclusion or guidance around that. We've talked already a bit about, Lisa's already talked about what recruitment processes that cardboard citizens have gone through. I want to continue to build on that and give you some examples of recruitment processes that I've been through. I think there is no doubt that recruiting inclusively does take a massive amount of work. I think it's really important to say it is a two-way process, and that not only are you vetting the people coming in, but they're vetting you as a potential employer, and that should not be forgotten. And also that it takes a lot of effort for the individual to go through that process. And how are you looking after them? Because recruitment is actually also a PR exercise. How people experience your process will dictate how they speak about it to other people. And I can tell you, as a Black woman, processes that have not been pleasant for me, I've absolutely spoken about them. And that word of mouth can damage your ability to recruit in an inclusive way, because people will go, you don't walk the walk. And that's an important thing to say. So the signals, the conscious and subconscious signals that you give out to the public will help you in terms of recruiting in an inclusive way and actually getting ethnically diverse candidates to apply. Research is important. Where you advertise is important. Really avoid just advertising in websites that have paywalls that can automatically scupper who can apply for you. Look at free sites, think about word of mouth, think about using networks or professional bodies. Take the time to build your process. And I'd always say, don't start your recruitment process at the point that you lose somebody. Start it when you've got a full team and think about how do I recruit in a way when people go to leave, because people will leave even if the organization is brilliant, because we're not, if you work in the arts sector, usually progression may involve movement, and that is a natural flow of how things work. So think about your process and involve the entire team. An example I'm going to give: when I was working at the Unicorn, I had to recruit an entire team from scratch, and I had to interrogate that process. And I want to share some of my learning with you. Some of this has already been said by Lisa, but I would like to also just flag some of this. We worked with some employment agencies. We looked at working with employment agencies that worked with candidates who were long-term unemployed, who were with candidates who were neurodiverse. We did guarantee interviews for people that met the minimum criteria. It was an important part of that process. We provided support in terms of writing applications and support around how to present yourself in an interview. It's a major part that these skills aren't necessarily taught, and you can't assume that they're there. So in terms of building your pipeline, how can you support people going through the process? That's something that you can do with outside agencies that also protects the anonymity of applicants that are applying. Be really clear about your terms and conditions. Transparency is so important in recruitment. Transparency in what the job is, what the terms and conditions are, what are the benefits. Talk about what welfare benefits you give. At Tallowa, because we are mainly people with lived experience of racism, we provide counselling as part of what we do. We provide welfare workshops, especially over the last year with the Black Lives Matter movement. Everybody was feeling really sore, and we had to kind of talk about that and think about that and offer resilience. That's something that we do. We also provide unconscious bias training. All of our facilitators get offered counselling as part of that process. So how are you supporting people that go through difficult lived experiences? That's an important part of how to keep your successful candidates. Talk about the ethos of your organisation. Be clear about what you want to do. Talk about the application and information around the application. Don't ask for things that are not necessary for the job. Let me give you a prime example. Somewhere that I used to work for, they used to ask for degree level entry for ushers. That's just not needed. And when I was working at the Unicorn, I did not ask anyone for their education level, because I was like, this is a job that you can train somebody to do. So really interrogate your job description and what you're asking people for do. I'm not a fan of saying 4 or 5 years experience. I'm more a fan of saying significant experience, demonstratable experience. That way you're not encouraging candidates to self-select away from applying for your job role, thinking, I haven't got 4 years of doing this experience. My previous job before I started at Tallower as executive director was senior producer. When I went for the interview, part of the process was asking me what support would I require once I get into the job role. They have a budget for me, and I have mentorship and peer support to be able to support myself into the job role. So I'm not a unicorn candidate. I have the key skills to do the job, but I don't have every skill to do the job. They were like, we think this candidate can develop into this job role. We're going to provide the support for it. So you have to be prepared to put the resource behind it. If you want to find ethnically diverse candidates, that's what you're going to have to do. So that would be my suggestion to you. Some other things that I'd throw out there around transparency of process: talk about who's on the panel. If I'm a fan of sending candidates the interview questions in advance, I might keep back one question of a scenario that's that they don't know about, so that I can like test how they think on their feet. But to me, an interview is not a memory test. It's about getting the best out of the potential candidate to find out, are they suitable for the job? Are they suitable for the organization? Do they want to work with us? So I think allowing candidates to bring in notes is good, especially because when you start talking about people with dyslexia or neurodiversity or any kind of disability, expecting them to have memorized facts is not useful. So how can you make that process more open? I suppose in summation, the recruitment process can lay out the plans of your pipeline of talent, laying out your stall of how you're an inclusive employer and what you want to do and how you want to do it. And it's important that you do the work before you invite people into your organization or show your plan of how you're going to do that. You're giving out these signals to show that you're serious about what you do. You'll remember with the Black Lives Matter movement, how certain organizations got ripped to pieces when they put out their statements because people went, you know, we don't believe you, you've not been doing the work. So this plan and sharing it in that way when you do your recruitment process demonstrates that you're doing the work. You've just heard Lisa list all the things that they're doing. If Lisa put out a statement saying, I'm an inclusive employer, I'd believe her because she can demonstrate that she is. So it's important to set out that stall. And I know there's a certain amount of fear around it, but if you can show that you're doing that, if you're working with organizations that can support you, like Achates, like people like Incarts, that you're showing that you're doing the groundwork, that you're involving your entire team, you'll be surprised about the generosity that's out there towards you as a company. And finally, remember, retention is important, training and professional development opportunities. I've got one member of staff who's doing an open university degree at the moment. Other people who are doing professional training. Is all part of keeping and retaining your staff. We know with ethnically diverse candidates, they aren't going to have everything that we expect, not through their fault, but because of the quality of opportunity. And we want to help them make that wider jump. And just to give you my final thing, to give you the disturbing stats that came out in January of 2021, 44% drop in ethnically diverse women arts workers over the past year. And that information came from the Entertainment Union's Equity and BEC2. It has shown that ethnically diverse workforce has been disproportionately impacted, which revealed a drop of 17,150 ethnically diverse female employees in the sector between the third quarter of 2019 and the third quarter of 2020, 44% drop. And in terms of across all genders, the drop for ethnically diverse workers in the arts sector has fallen by 19% in comparison to 3% of the overall reduction of white workers. That's what you're up against. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. There's some salient and I think, you know, statistics that really sort of demonstrate the depth of the problem that we're dealing with there. Thank you for that. I was particularly pleased to hear you talk about recruitment as something that should be proactively thought about as well, not something that is a reaction to a problem of someone leaving. And I've experienced that myself in previous recruitment roles, where the attitude of the recruiter has been, just get me someone, this is a problem that needs to be solved, rather than how can this benefit my organisation and how can this benefit the sector I'm working in. So it was good to hear that. Thank you. Elise, over to you.
I just want to say thank you to Lisa and Carolyn and explaining the processes that you're doing as organisations. I'm coming to sort of speak as the founder of the Diversity in Classical Music Network, and what we found as a bunch of individuals who trying to sort of make our way in classical music. The foundation of the network was to support Black, Asian and ethnically diverse individuals working in the industry, working on the administration side. A group of individuals with lived experiences and expertise in the classical music sector who wanted to strengthen equality across the industry by providing a sense of belonging and building a safe space for unheard and unrepresented voices within the classical music community. We wanted to support and create clear pathways for those wishing to enter the industry, something that we ourselves had sort of differing situations with. And I think when we came together, the one thing that we felt was that we were not as far along in our careers as we would have hoped. Some of us had entered the industry quite late on because there wasn't the opportunity within there. I myself found it, wasn't too difficult to get into the industry through an internship, but it was the experiences we had when we were in these organizations. And having sort of had these separate experiences coming together, we realized we've tackled quite a lot being Black and brown in an industry that doesn't seem to be as diverse as it likes to be. So from a recruitment point of view, I would say, the use of language at the point of interview is really important, and it sets the tone for the individual entering the company, because it's important that you're not just sort of agenda picking and tokenism and looking at the quality of the candidate, where that's not coming through the traditional lines of the careers and the university channels that you would hope, but looking at their whole career as a whole and all the experience that they have got to that point. Excuse me. I think it's important to set about the belief and the culture of the organisation in order to support a diverse workforce and maintaining them. And I think that's the key that we found as in this network, is that we were all sort of moving around within the industry. We were never in one place for long enough because we didn't feel comfortable and we didn't feel that support. Half of the network came from the Chineke Orchestra, where they've been for several years now, because they felt they had that support and that safe space to talk about issues that were happening within the industry, but they were necessarily left unheard of. And since sort of the Black Lives Matter movement had sort of come about, there were organizations reaching out and looking for support to help them tackle this diversity issue. But one of the things that we found is that our network individuals felt marginalized and afraid to speak out in previous years. And they didn't know what support there was, what structure of support there was in place. So whether that's sector support or company or organizational support, that's really something to think about. What is there in your EDI policy? Is there proof of action in your EDI policy? Are you working with organizations like Creative Access to create that pipeline, as Caroline spoke about, to come through from university and to maintain staying in the industry? One of the things that we found as a network was that those who are from Black and Asian and ethnically diverse backgrounds who are in sort of senior management and director positions had a sort of a singular approach, where they had sort of made it and weren't necessarily trying to support those coming underneath them. And what we wanted to do was build the network to offer support from the ground up, where we were connecting them with directors and senior managers who are in positions of influence who can help those coming through. And also create, sharing experiences, giving an opportunity for these senior managers and directors to open up about the experiences that they had within the industry, which they had been previously reluctant to speak about. And through the connection of the network, we are inviting industry leaders, not just Black and Asian ethnic diverse, other industry leaders, to come and speak to us and see how we can help support you with your recruitment and reaching out to quite a big talent pipeline. There are networks that we have, not just in classical music, but the wider arts community, who are reaching out and supporting each other. And that's, not only through Ink Arts and Black Lives in Music. I think it's important to remember that when you are entering sort of a new company or coming into an interview, is that you are creating that safe space and you are vocalizing that there is a support system in place for an individual should they need that. And if they're looking to extend and further their career, that there is that leadership support. And that's not been very clear for a lot of individuals. Is there sort of board shadowing? Is there that diversity of thought to offer them the opportunity to get to that next level in their career, so they don't feel like they need to leave and go to another organization? So I think setting that very clearly within the recruitment process, that there is the opportunity to progress your career, is really, really important.
Thank you, Elise. It was very interesting to hear you talk about the need for safe spaces. There've been a couple of comments coming through on YouTube around that, which time allowing, we'll explore in a little while. I'm going to move to some questions now for various of the panelists. And we've talked a lot about a lot of the challenges, the extra work, which Lisa was very honest about. In creating a diversity and inclusively led recruitment approach. But I'm just wondering what the other barriers the panelists have faced in creating the experiences and approaches they've just described, not just in their own organisations now, but in previous organisations as well. Where has that resistance to change come from? Boards, perhaps, and how have people sought to counteract this? Carolyn, if I might go to you first, because you've only been with Tallowa 10 months and have worked in a number of organisations. It'd be interesting to hear your perspective on that.
So barriers to successful recruitment. Some of it is about preparation. Feeling like the process hasn't been prepared enough, or they're not so one of the most horrific interviews I went to, just going to give examples, the most horrific interviews I went to, we were asked to do a task, and it was a computer-based task, and they had made no provision for anyone who was neurodiverse. And as someone who is neurodiverse, expected to perform something in a time-limited fashion was impossible. The feedback I got was it was like a kind of what's it called? It was a cognitive test. This was for a front of house job. I was given a cognitive test. And they were like, oh yes, everything you answered was right, but you didn't complete everything. I can't do time limited tests, and to this day I don't understand why it was ever needed. So the barriers, as far as I'm concerned, to recruitment is asking people to do things that are totally unnecessary for the job role. To me, that is the biggest barrier. And also it's about the information and how it's presented. I think Lisa mentioned about kind of accepting video applicants and not expecting it to be a written application. I think is important, finding different ways for people to submit their information. I think it's about just making sure that the information that you're putting forward is really clear and concise. And it's just, I think that's just the main barrier. I hope that's specific enough. I'm sorry, I feel like I could have given more examples, but I don't know how useful that would have been.
No, that's a very, very helpful example. I'm also thinking in terms of persuading colleagues, perhaps board of trustees in previous organisations that perhaps haven't appreciated the need for an inclusive approach. And this is, you know, conversations I've had in the past in various organisations where, you know, someone has sat on the board and sort of said, there's just no need to do this. This is extra work that we don't need to do, and how you overcome that and explain the need for an inclusive approach and why that benefits the entire organisation.
Yes, so I think I've been very lucky. I've never had that type of pushback in terms of putting in new recruitment structures broadly. That it's been well and positively received. I think where there's maybe been grumbles is concerns amongst the team that it will mean additional work for them. And I think sometimes what you've got to consider is what is the resource that you're providing to support the existing team. When we were employing, we were focusing on disabled people, there was a concern amongst other members of the team that it would mean more work for them. And I think that's about explanation, that's about resource, that's about kind of reassuring that this is going to make the workplace better for everybody. And what we found was when we started putting in systems in place that created flexibility for a certain group of people, we found it had a knock-on benefit for people who had young children, or a knock-on benefit for people who had unseen disabilities that they hadn't declared because they didn't want to. So I think my experience is when you make things better for one group of people, it always makes it better for everybody else. And that what we're talking about is human rights and people's right to employment. And that when you look at it in that way, we should all be making the effort to make sure that the workplace is inclusive.
Thanks, Caroline. Lisa, you touched on some of that in your introduction when you were talking about, you know, facing up to the challenges that there is extra work involved, but there are benefits to that. And again, it's similar to Caroline. How did you sort of overcome and provide the support for people to really embrace those approaches?
Well, I mean, I think we had a problem, like quite an obvious problem, is that people just weren't applying for jobs, diverse or not, you know. So we were putting jobs out there for senior roles, and we were only getting a handful of applicants. So, you know, there was obviously something wrong, and I think it, you know, speaks to Caroline's point, is that, you know, if you make things better for one group of people, then it's better for everyone. And that's what we find, you know, it makes absolute sense. You know, we are a better organization. We are putting out better messaging. We are thinking more carefully about everything that we're doing in terms of recruitment and how we communicate as a result of having taken these steps.
Thank you. I'm going to very quickly move to a question from the audience, and do keep those questions coming in, by the way. And this is a question around the safe space, the creation of safe space for people from the global majority, which you spoke about, Elise, and what does that look like in practice?
I think I've sort of spoken about that this week a lot, actually, and it's about creating an environment where one is dealing with an issue within racism, and where they feel they are comfortable to come speak to you about that. So you're given the option and the ability to tackle that issue. And it's not just a safe space. It doesn't have to be amongst only Black and brown people. And I think that's really clear, that needs to be made. It can be amongst, you know, allies, and it has to be clear that there is that safe space. And a lot of organizations are really struggling to provide that. There's a lot of saying and doing in terms of doing the EDI work, but not actually any output. And I think by showing the output, you're creating that safe space automatically.
Thank you. I mean, we've talked about many different facets of diversity and the need to recognise those in terms of ethical recruitment. But I'm just interested from the panel, what does diversity mean depending on, for example, geography and community background? For example, what might diversity mean for people coming from a socioeconomically depressed rural or coastal area? There's obviously huge intersectionality around the whole thing, or in the other home nations, for example. What approaches might need to be taken into consideration there? Lisa, if I can go to you first, particularly with regards to cardboard citizens and its focus on people with lived experience of homelessness.
In what approaches in terms of changing recruitment practices?
In terms of how you approach diversity in terms of, for example, socioeconomic background, and you know, I realise that, you know, there's a huge amount that cardboard citizens do, and an enormous diversity of people that come to you who have experienced homelessness, but particularly, for example, you know, people who have come from geographical backgrounds outside a major metropolitan centre, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of recruitment, you know, we've stopped looking for the regular education paths. You know, we changed our recruitment pack to reflect that. You know, I think it's like work experience or any education experience that you feel is relevant, to try and make people feel, you know, that they don't have to fulfill those. I think Caroline referred to, you know, having a degree for some entry-level roles. So we've removed some of that. I think that it's for us, it's particularly important, obviously, because we're an organisation, a theatre company, that work with people with experience of homelessness. So it's important that people accessing our work can feel that the organisation is made up of people like them, and that you can see yourself when you walk in the door, and that there's a level playing field and not a sense of us and them between our membership and our staff team and our board. And that's something that we work on all the time and try to get better at. And that's what we do in our theatre making as well. So it's reflected in the work.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you very much, Lisa. Carolyn, do you have any perspective you want to share on that?
I think your processes has to adapt depending on the job that you're asking people to do. We're currently recruiting for young trustees, and that application pack looks different from other packs that we put out. We talk about what is a trustee, we break it down. What would you be doing for Talawa? We make it clear we're not expecting people to have to understand, to have background in governance. We're going to give you that experience. This is going to be an opportunity for you to have that professional development. What we want is people that are connected to Croydon, because actually your experience of being connected there is what we want. And in exchange for that experience, we're going to give you this training and professional development and help you to develop networks in the arts sector. So that is part of our, how are we finding the future leaders of tomorrow? I agree absolutely with Lisa about education. I think as a sector, we are really terrible about asking for people for more education than is actually needed. There's actually a snobbery about it. My degree is not in arts management, it's in leisure management and sports science. You know, that's not where I was going to end up. So understanding transferable skills and people's experience, which Elise talked about, and how that could then be transferred to your job, is about just doing that creative thinking. Look, we work in a creative industry. How can we not be creatively thinking about recruitment? It's bonkers. We suddenly get all robotic about it. It's like, no, think creatively about the type of person that can do the work that you're asking them to do. And then you get unexpected benefits from that. Where you're just, you know, I've had the unexpected benefits of people, you know, we were working with an international company, and I suddenly find out people have got multiple languages and they can help communicate with the company or do translation or, you know, all of that. And once you've got people in post. Like how I've ended up where I am is because I had a job made redundant and they went, well, Carolyn could try this other job. And they just shifted me over and it ended up being producing. So looking at who your staff are and what they do now and asking them what their skill set is. So doing regular skill audits, that isn't just about the job they do, but what other skills they have. And you can look at how you move them. And having a really rigorous internal promotion system will also help with you, as Elise was saying, about keeping the talent in-house that you've managed to recruit.
Thanks, Caroline. And as a follow-up to that, I mean, we've spoken a lot about the need for support and to stop looking for these kind of unicorn candidates that you know, the perfect candidate that frankly doesn't exist. What examples of support have you got from your career and you as a recruiter and employer, where someone has perhaps joined an organization that doesn't have all the skills or all the experiences that you're necessarily looking for in terms of education or previous employment, and how have you supported them to grow in those roles?
It more often than not, your senior leadership will have their own network, and mentorship is massively important. Connecting up with someone who's maybe 3 or 4 years, 5 years ahead of where you want to be in your career, and having someone that can talk to you and help you. Continually training and professional development, continuing to learn, doing regular courses, having a training budget for every person in your organization so that they're able to consider what training they want to do. So there's there's 2 types of things. So there's the training you have to do for your job, and then there's the professional development, which is about where you want to get to. And I think as an employer, you have a responsibility to provide budget for both those things. And certainly with organizations that I've worked with, the best organizations I've worked with have absolutely provided that. And it doesn't always have to be about money. It can absolutely be informal. It can absolutely be about networks. So for example, we came together at the beginning of this year to create a network of ethnically diverse executive directors and EPs. And we just did that together by ourselves. So you could do that. You could create networks to provide support for your own staff, like Elise has done. So I think it is just about thinking really creatively about how you can provide that support.
Thank you very much from me to Lisa, Caroline and Elise. Fascinating discussion. I'm going to hand back to Caroline now.
Thank you, Matthew, and my sincere thanks to Lisa, Caroline and Elise. What passion and commitment from 3 truly inspiring leaders, and not only passion and commitment, but really practical approaches that I think a lot of people are really going to benefit from. So thank you, all of you. It's really appreciated. Just want to add in that, of course, Achates is always happy to chat and talk these things through. And that means equally, if you just want a pro bono chat as well, we're always here. Please feel able to contact us. And so, having said thank you to our panel, to Matthew, I'd also like to thank those of you that are with us today. Hope you'll also be able to join us on the 14th of October for our next Achates Live, which is going to be focusing on the question of working internationally, something that we may be starting to think again, but perhaps brings new challenges in the period ahead. And then very finally, just for you that haven't already received an email about it, our sister organisation, the Achates Philanthropy Foundation, will be presenting a symposium during the week of the 15th of November called All That's Been Revealed, and there'll be nightly events curated by writer and director Javad Alipour, and we're looking forward to sharing details of that with you very soon. Some really exciting panels and speakers coming, so lots to look forward to. Thank you all so much for your time, and see you next month. Bye now.